George, first and foremost, mate, how's your health?
Oof, yeah, getting there slowly. I mean, definitely, if there's ever a bad time to catch COVID, it's sort of after 10 days of the Tour de France. I think you're on the ropes anyway, and then COVID sort of kicks your ass a little bit. So yeah, it's all right. I mean, I'm healthy again. I'm been 10 days or whatever, negative back training. Um, but definitely still feels a little bit. There's still a few weird things with the body that happen after COVID. So hopefully they don't hang around too long. But yeah, I'm getting there.
Mate, can I say, I mean, I know every sports fan in the country just felt gutted for you, mate. I mean, I got no words for you. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was pretty gutting. I mean, it's the year's just been. I was out for a month with sickness at the start of the year, and then everything's built around the Tour de France. Everything's going well. You're winning the race. You're in. Your team's winning. Everything's going well. You're riding well, and then yeah, it happens. But I was obviously pretty disappointed, pretty gutted, but also at the same time, it was always a risk. Having not had COVID, somehow dodged it for 2.5 years, and
Wow.
yeah, hits you in the middle of the Tour de France. So there was sort of a sense of inevitability that at some point it was going to derail a race, but unfortunately it was just the Tour de France, the big one.
And just, I mean, I know it's not, it's not you personally. You can't help all this stuff, but do you have kind of feelings of, oh, I've let people down and stuff like that? And if you do have those, how, emotionally, how long does it take you to kind of get your head around that and go, hey, it's not me? I mean, but I mean, it's natural to feel like that, I bet.
Honestly, I didn't really feel that I'd let anybody down. Apart from, it was just really shit trying to watch the race. Literally 2 days later, or a day later, when Pogacar got completely isolated by Jumbo, had no one left to help him, and then that's the day he lost the race.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm rational enough to say, okay, well, we have a lot of guys taken out with COVID during, inside our bubble. I didn't bring COVID in, and it was just unlucky, or it was definitely out of my control. I did everything I could to not get COVID. I mean, before the race, didn't see my friends that isolated for almost a month, before the tour. So, I didn't really feel guilt in that way, but I just felt really shit watching the race
Mm.
when Tadej was isolated and just getting worked over by a team that still had numbers, and ended up, you just turn the TV off, don't you? And
Yeah.
try and forget about
Yeah.
there's a bike race on, and every time I watched the tour I ended up feeling bad, so I just stopped watching it and sort of just avoided it, and they sort of made life a bit easier.
I understand that. Did you honestly think that there's every chance that he would three-peat if your team had been able to stay together? How strong did you feel at that stage?
Oh, 100%. It was okay. Jonas was really strong and deserved to win the race, but was only one day Jonas was stronger than Tadej, and that was the day where Tadej was completely isolated and had no teammates, and got worked over, and they were able to use a numerical advantage. So, I think we had a good lead. We already had more of a lead than we expected. By the time I left the race, we were 40 seconds up, and things were going really, really well, and then it just went absolutely pear-shaped. I mean, they finished with four guys. A few COVID victims, a few one injury. We lost four guys basically. So, and one of the guys that was there was, he was the worst guy in the race because he was one of the best riders in the world and had COVID, 10 days before the tour started, and they still brought him thinking he would be okay, and he ended up just being, at the back every day. So essentially they finished with three healthy riders, and I think without that, with a normal year, 8 guys to the finish, Tadej not having to do crazy stuff and cover everything himself, I think we were in a great position. But, credit to Jumbo, because they knew that they couldn't be stronger individually than Pogacar, but they could, put together a team where if they just worked him over and managed to isolate him, they could beat him, and that's exactly what happened.
Champion cyclist George Bennett is with us, who spent 7 years with Jumbo, and then signed for the UAE Team Emirates for 2022. Unfortunately, COVID out of that race. I just got some general questions for you, mate, that I want to just ping by you and see and just get your response to. Does it get, and some of these are dumb, but I just need your answer. Does it get easier to ride? Is that such a thing? I mean, once you've done it a few times and you know what to expect in that, does it get easier?
Well, no, because I remember I went back there this year. We started in Denmark, and I was just thinking like to myself, is this worse than other years, or is this modern cycling, or have I just do I just look back through rose tinted glasses and think the tour was always just an enjoyable race because you go there and it's horrible the first 10 days especially the first 5-6 days because they're generally flat stages and the amount of stress and crashes and risks that everybody's taking. I mean, you're fighting for every centimetre on the road, and it's just unlike any other race. And the fact that you've got I don't know how many million people. I think they said 3 million people were watching roadside in Denmark, and it's
wow.
That the chaos that brings and the stress that brings in the bunch and the threat of wind, and I mean it's definitely like no other race, and you forget how bad it is until you go back. So it doesn't get any easier, especially because as you become a better cyclist, I'm expected to be right at the pointy end and sort of directing the boys around a bit. So there's a bit more pressure on my shoulders, whereas my first year I went to the tour, it was just like go right around, you can stay at the back for the first week and try not to crash, and it doesn't really matter if you just wait for the mountains. But in my new role there's definitely no waiting for the mountains.
Do you have a favourite leg? This is George Bennett with us on the platform, and the Tour de France was won by Jonas Vingegaard yesterday. Look, do you have a favourite leg or a favourite bit of the tour? And I'm only saying this, George, because for all of us who watch, I mean, it's just like seeing a car commercial. It's a beautiful, France is so beautiful in that. And I know that you don't get as much time to admire it as you go past, but is there a single bit of it that you really like?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's basically 3 stages in the race. There's the opening week, which is the worst part, worse than any bike race in the world. You just got to survive. And then there's you sort of, for New Zealanders, it's kind of like you're taking the shine off the new ball, everybody's sort of, a lot of people have given up and a lot of people had their hopes sort of dashed by this sort of stage 10, 11, and then you hit the Alps and, the more people that get their head down, the better the race becomes, because it becomes about legs as opposed to about stress. And when you hit the Alps, I mean, there's just no better place to ride a bike, especially if it's good, the sun's out. And I mean, I can't get the smile off my face when I'm racing in the Alps and in the Pyrenees. Pyrenees is kind of home for me. I live in the middle of the Pyrenees, and so either of those two big mountains, that's what I'm built for. That's what I'm good at, and it's about legs. It's about that's when you see these amazing, iconic Tour de France shots, and if we could just do the whole race there, then that'd sit me down at the ground.
When you have, like, I watched a couple of crashes there where there'd be the big bunch of blokes and you're all riding and there's some dickhead who's too close and he hits a rider and then everyone falls over and takes out a whole lot. Does the peloton wait for you on an occasion like that because it's no one's fault, or what are the rules around it? Do you have rules between you all or what?
Not specifically. I mean, there's no rule, but there is a sort of unwritten rule, I guess, or a slight gentleman's agreement, I guess, where if the guy winning the race crashes, you don't attack. But if the race is on, the race is on. It's up to them to get back. But you wouldn't try and benefit from someone's misfortune. Let's say, if someone crashed and the race wasn't really on, you wouldn't suddenly attack.
Okay.
But for example, this year, I mean, there's one of the stages that started, I think stage 8 or something like this. There was quite a big crash in the start. No one's fault in terms of, not a spectator's fault. I mean, we just crashed. We're pushing the limit. We're going 60, 70k an hour, a few centimeters apart from each other. I mean, crashes happen all the time. But this was a particularly bad one. And, the breakaway was trying to get established and we kept racing. And we kept racing for another 40, 50k and those guys took them a long, long time to get back.
That time trial, I watched, the penultimate leg before the ride into Paris. And the bloke that won that, and averaging over 50Ks, mate. I mean, that's insane, is what that is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's technology's come a long way, bikes come a long way, skin suits, everything like that. I mean, the speed's just going up and up. I mean, this was the fastest Tour de France ever, and that's just the trend, you know. It's just going to be faster and faster because training's changing, technology's changing. You know, clean cycling, modern cycling has now become so advanced that we're traveling faster than they did, you know, back in the dark age of cycling where, you know, sort of people were up to no good
Mm,
and you know, cycling's now evolved into the cleanest sport in the world. I mean, the most tested riders in the world.
good.
Yet we're going faster because, you know, we live at altitude. You know, the bikes are unreal, you know. To ride 40k an hour on a time trial bike is really quite easy. So for us, you know, if you're commuting, it's not much different to, you know, driving into work.
Yeah. Crazy. Or a couple of questions, and we'll let you go. I mean, I just have so much admiration for what yourself and Julian Dean did. The horses, mate. I mean, like, you know, you guys are a pack horse. You're a mule up a hill going into the Himalayas. It's awesome, eh? I mean, they're right. The guy that wins it must love you guys.
Yeah, I mean, me and Jules, I mean, Jules is one of my sort of idols growing up, and we have very different roles. And Jules was a lead out man, and he was one of the best helpers in the world on the flat sprints, you know. And his skill was raw power and risking his life and knowing how to, you know, his what he did was just nuts, you know, putting his body on the line. I'm just about my job's more just about suffering, you know, and herding in the mountains and getting up these hills and bringing, you know, offering support in that role. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing about cycling. It's such a strange sport where it's individual, where one guy wins, but you know, without his team, he's completely up shit creek. And you look
Yeah.
at, you know, we're a great example of that this year, and it's a bizarre team individual sport, and I think helpers or domestiques, as you know, they're called over here, is a completely underrated outside the world of cycling. I mean, in cycling, you know, there's famous domestiques. I look at one of my friends, Sepp Kuss. He could be winning the race or contending the race overall. Yet his job is to help Jonas win the race, and he's, you know, compensated for that, paid for that, and I think he's the rest of the world completely un he's underrated or underappreciated for the work that domestiques do.
Finally, will it ever be overtaken for importance? I mean, look, is there a chance that, you know, the LIV golf thing, that the Saudis come in and go, oh, we're going to buy the Tour de France, we're going to make our own Tour de France? I hope for God's sake not. I can't see it happening, but I never thought it would happen in golf either, and it looks as though that's going to happen.
Well, the problem is in cycling is, you know, there's 180 riders in the Tour de France, and there's 1,000 guys trying to get into the Tour de France. So it's so prestigious. There's so much history that if some guys go, oh, we're gonna, you know, I mean, Vallon League started a few years ago, and because I mean, it's a pretty loaded, well, pretty complicated issue. But basically, the ASO who own the Tour de France, you know, we don't like them as riders because, you know, we have no TV rights. We get none of that money. We get no, you know, the only money we're getting is salaries from teams. So, you know, salaries in cycling could be NBA style
Mm.
if we got the TV rights
Yeah,
and how
right.
many people watch the tour. But the ASO have a monopoly on everything. But the thing is, they know it's the Tour de France. So if we said, you know, we're not going to the Tour de France, we're going to this Vallon League, which is just some sort of shitty kind of 3 4 day races that don't really have any prestige or any history or nothing, then there's so many people that would just be prepared to come in and ride the Tour de France because it's the Tour. Um, so I think that there's no way that the Tour will be surpassed or replaced. But I think, you know, I'm hoping that the ASO rider relationship improves and there's a lot more revenue sharing going forward because that is one thing that our sport is so in the ice ages because
Yeah, man.
you know,
Yeah.
we don't have zero TV
Mate,
rights
you're the rock
and
stars. You're the guys playing the songs on the stage. I'm the audience paying to see you. I'm not paying to see some admin
mm,
guy, you know?
exactly, yeah, it is bizarre. It's a very bizarre setup, and you know, the cycling is notoriously bad at unionizing or I mean, we're riders and we're always at each other's throat. We're in the races and even off the bike, it's very hard to get a consensus because the other problem is you have some invite teams. So, 17 of us, 17 or 18 teams at the tour could say, well, look, we're gonna protest. We're not going to ride until we get some TV rights. And the other teams, the invite teams, the small French teams that are there, 5, 6 of them, they say, well, we're racing, and then you either have everybody or nobody,
Yeah,
and,
right.
and that's the issue that we're running into, where you've got all these cultures, all these different interests coming together in this melting pot, and it just creates this, this very non-unison sort of front, and yeah, it's very bizarre. But essentially, ASO hold the power. They're the owners of the Tour de France. They've now got the Women's Tour de France that started yesterday, and they own a lot of the other big races as well. They've bought the Vuelta a España, they've bought Paris-Roubaix, and a lot of big races like that. So, yeah, I think, hopefully that changes in the future. But I know that during my career, I mean, it's a bit like the guys, who have played cricket their whole life, and then you get the IPL starting up. I think that we're years away from that, but when that happens, if there is a sort of breakaway league, there will be huge salary increases and things like that.